few years ago, I was in San Francisco, that queerest of capitals, in one of the queerest of bookstores, and I asked for the bisexual section. I was greeted by only a handful of books, and that was the day I learned that bisexuality has an abysmal amount of space on the bookshelf of queer lives. I remember thinking, why aren't we here? Where are all the bisexuals? It was from that point on that I came to understand that we have untethered bisexual people from their own culture, history, and science. But it was also from that point on that I learned that if we dig deep, reading old, dusty books, searching for representation in historical archives, and learning the academies of our identities, we can find a whole bi-universe. Already in the 1940s, sex researcher Alfred Kinsey criticized scholars who insisted on turning sexuality into a binary. As he wrote in a critique of his contemporaries, more basic than any error brought out in the analysis is the assumption that homosexuality and heterosexuality are two mutually exclusive phenomena. Data derived from such faulty assumptions can only lead to an entrenching into science of moralizing conclusions about how sexuality should be rather than how it is. Instead, Kinsey found that the true picture of sexuality is one of endless intergradation between hetero and homosexual, and he reconceptualized sexuality as a continuum. Researchers found that 1/4 to half of all people are in the middle of this continuum, between 0, exclusively heterosexual, and 6, exclusively homosexual. Although rarely used by the people who fall into this mix of hetero and homosexual, the word for it, the hidden, erased, stigmatized, beautiful, rebellious, accurate word for it, is bisexual. And while we are just deconstructing binaries, note that the bi in bisexual means two, but not the two you probably think. The bi in bisexual does not stand for the gender binary, men and women. Bisexual was coined in the late 1800s to describe those who had both homo and heterosexual attractions, so to same and other genders. Today, the most common definition of bisexuality is the sexual and/or romantic attraction to multiple genders. But when I was just a candy-colored baby bi girl, I knew none of this. I knew whom I loved, but I didn't know where I belonged. I went to my first Pride March and thought it had nothing to do with me because I was never taught my own history and I never thought to ask. That's what erasure does. It steals our ability to ask the right questions. It simplifies who am I to am I. Researchers found that compared to lesbian and gay people, bisexuals are the least likely to be part of queer groups. This has been linked to comparatively high rates of isolation, anxiety, depression, substance use, and non-suicidal self-injury. It seems that without the buffer of community, being told repeatedly that you don't exist can lead to your own annihilation. And to all the candy-colored baby bi girls today, I'm so sorry. Yes, things are better, but they aren't better enough. Research published in 2020 found that bisexual girls are more often bullied, touched without their consent, and are judged more harshly for their behavior and dress than their peers. They are assumed to be promiscuous, making them subject to what has been referred to as a slut discourse. Slut discourse is the parasitic stalker that follows bisexuals everywhere. Tell people you are bi and their brains glitch to threesomes and sexual insatiability. The toxic assumption that bi people are untrustworthy partners, unable to be monogamous. That we are performing our sexuality for them and that everything we are and everything we have is for them to take. We carry slut discourse into universities, where bisexual women are more likely to be sexually assaulted and less likely to receive appropriate counseling services than their peers. into workplaces where bisexuals are given a bisexuality penalty when coming out because, compared to homosexuality, saying you're bi is seen as inappropriate, too much, too sexual. Into relationships where studies have found that 61% of bisexual women and 37% of bisexual men experienced rape, physical violence, and/or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime, rates far higher than experienced by homo or heterosexual people. We carry it into justification for the horrifying practices of conversion therapy and corrective rape. There is an alternative to slut discourse, which is denial. Perhaps you're accused of lying because you're actually gay, told you need to prove it, show me. To count as bi, society tells us that our word is not enough. This carries over into our refugee policies, where bisexual asylum seekers are denied access to safety because it is assumed that they can just pretend to be straight, or worse, that they are lying about being bi, about being persecuted by the state and their own families. I've given many reasons for people to stay in silence, in the big bi closet, hidden away where most people will live forever. Research has found that bi people are invisible in most spheres of their lives. Bisexuals are less than half as likely as homosexuals to be out to their partners, to their parents, to their own children, and to their colleagues. And compared to bi women, bi men are even less likely to be out because of how bisexuality is seen to destabilize masculinity. People can also be more than one color of the rainbow. Many non-binary and trans people also identify as bi, but their bisexual identity is typically erased and eclipsed by their gender identity. So what should bisexuals do? Should we hide until society changes, collectively hush until it's safer to come out? As activist Audre Lorde wrote, "Your silence will not protect you." It's been over 130 years of research and activism on and for bi lives, and we are still fighting the same fights. It's time for a new strategy, to come out and say what we stand for. To all of those attracted beyond gender, if you can, I wish for you to say, "I am bisexual." And I will not sit down until you recognize and include us in your conversations about diversity. And there's no perfect time to come out. We can wait and wait and wait, saying one day we will show the world our shimmering, true, beautiful bi colors. But if we wait for the perfect moment, we will fail. As Audre Lorde said about standing up against oppression, while we wait in silence for that final luxury of fearlessness, the weight of silence will choke us. Visibility is essential to affording bi people around the world human rights. The psychological idea known as the contact hypothesis has repeatedly found evidence for the benefits of knowing people from other groups to reduce intergroup conflict, discrimination, and fear. That means knowing someone who is bisexual, your child, your parent, your teacher, your colleague, your friend, or even seeing people in the media or on TV who are openly bisexual makes it much harder to say that we don't exist, that we are other, less than, perverted, that we don't deserve protection. Visibility saves lives. Visibility is beautiful. And while there may be darkness in the world around us, no matter where we live or what adversity we are currently going through, light still resides in our hearts. Research has found that despite the negative aspects that I just introduced you to, most bi people love being bisexual. And the most common word they use to explain why is freedom. Freedom to love without regard for biological sex or gender. Freedom from social labels and gender roles. Freedom to explore diverse relationships and experiences. And freedom of sexual expression. This is not to say that monosexuals are not free, but rather that embracing who you are is an exercise in freedom. We can also find freedom in the stories of our bisexual ancestors, in research that validates the collective challenges of those who are a blend of homo and heterosexual, and in the victories of bi activists. And it is when we uncover all of these that we find solid ground for the beautiful bisexual desires that are all around and perhaps even inside of us. No matter what your own sexuality is, I want to help you ask yourself new questions about who you are and how you love, and to open your heart to new possibilities. I poured all of me and all of the research I could find on bisexuality and a whole master's degree in queer history into this book. Or as sometimes people say, I did the research so you don't have to. I wrote this book that I had been searching for that time years ago in that bookstore in San Francisco. My wish is that when you read Bi, you use it to deconstruct toxic misconceptions and fuel bisexual inclusion, to build a world where all the candy-colored bisexuals can live happily amongst the rainbow gumdrops, and to ask yourself new questions that allow you to go deeper into your own sexuality. And remember to never stop fighting for love, because sexual freedom is magnificent and fragile. Thank you.